Hey guys, this is George with Firehouse Music, and today we're going to continue with our music theory lesson from before. We were talking about musical notation, and we talked about the y-axis. If you remember, we represent music in a graph where the y-axis is pitch or frequency. If you haven't seen that video, go watch it now. And today we're going to talk about the x-axis or time. Just like with pitch, we had specific symbols that we were using, and if you remember, we were moving up the staff and using the different clefs to create different sounds. Now we're going to look at how that works with time. The equivalent of maybe not of the clef, but what gives the staff rhythmic meaning is your time signature. And the time signature is represented as a fraction, and I should probably do a video specifically just on this, but for now I'll just give you a very small summary of this. So essentially what you have is a fraction where the top number is the number of beats that you have, and the bottom number is which note gets the beat. So if you have a metronome clicking and going 1, 2, 3, 4, that number is going to tell you which of these notes it's going to take the beat. Now, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, so let's backtrack a little bit. So, when I mean notes, what I'm talking about is this different rhythmic notation figures that have different values to them. So we have this. It's a whole note, and in common time, this equals 4 beats. A half note, and this is all the way down, which in common time equals 2 beats. A quarter note, which in common time is 1 beat. An eighth note, which in common time equals half a beat, or 2 per beat. I think this is easier to understand. It's a lot easier for you to think, okay, between claps, I have to play 2 of those. Then each one of these ones gets half a clap. That's hard to get. So I've always liked it 1 and 2 and or 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, as opposed to, okay, so it's just half, because that makes it ambiguous, right? So then we have the 16th note, which gets a quarter beat, or 4 per beat. And that's the one that you guys count. 1E and the 2E and the 3E and the 4E and the 1E and the 2E and the 3E and the 4E and the, right? And there are other figures as well. You have 32nd notes and 64th notes and 128th notes. And there's all the tuplets, triplets, quintuplets, sextuplets, and so on. But we're not going to talk about those yet. This should be enough to give you a basic understanding of how the beats are subdivided in music. Now let's get back to our first example. Actually, I want to leave those there for now, and let's look at our time signatures. So the time signature gives our measures meaning. So if we have this, right, and then let's say we have 4/4, which is common time. And then you have your beats in there, and you have this. So this line right here, notice the end of a measure. And the end of a measure is defined by this. This defines the measure. So this 4/4 means that this measure has 4 beats and a quarter note. See, 4 quarters, 4 quarter notes. So each measure equals 4 quarter notes. That means that I can fit a whole note here if I want. Right? I can make it 2 half notes if I want. I can make it 4 quarter notes if I want, or 8 16th notes, 8 eighth notes, or 16 16th notes, and so on. Right? So then the other thing, the different time signatures that we can have with the same number at the bottom, the same denominator, we can have 3/4 time, which, if you can guess, it's only 3 beats, and the quarter note gets the beat, right? Or I can have those awful close there, 2/4, which has 2 beats, and the quarter note gets the beat. And I can have 5/4 and 6/4 and so on, and each time you're just increasing the number of beats at the that you're getting. Now, when the denominator changes, now things get really interesting. So before I get into that, I want to make sure you understand what the feel is, right? So 4/4 is what most rock music is going to be like. So when you have that beat, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? That's a 4/4 beat, okay? And most popular music is going to be written in 4/4. Then you have 3/4. 3/4 is, if you can think of a waltz, that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's a waltz. And then your 2/4 is like your country and western. That 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's 2/4, right? A little, like country and western, like that dance, square dance music is usually written in 2. So now we have what happens when the number at the bottom changes. Well, we can have the exact same thing happening, just with a different note taking the beat. So I can have 3/8, which behaves exactly like 3/4, right? Just with smaller measures, or 4/8, which behaves exactly like 4/4, or 2/8, which behaves exactly like 2/4. But to me, that's redundant. It's not that interesting. But what happens when we have something like 6/8? Now think, that's a terrible 6. How an eraser now. So now 6/8. Now with 6/8, things get interesting because you don't have really 6 beats. What you have is 2 beats made out of 3 subdivisions, or 3 additional beats. This is what I mean. So if you were to count 6/8, the way it works is you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? And if you ever taken like ballroom dancing lessons and stuff, you have that count: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? That. Notice that there's an accent on every group of 3. So you have 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's what is basically 2 made out of 2 sets of 3. That's what we call a compound meter. A compound meter is when the beat is made out of 3 additional little beats with an accent at the beginning of each one. And so now we have the subdivisions of 6, 9, 12. So, 6/8 is that. I can have 9/8, right? And 9/8, traditionally, before you start talking about Dream Theater and all the complicated stuff, we're looking at basics right now, right? So traditionally, I'm aware that you can subdivide these beats into more complex figures to make it more interesting. But for now, right, we're gonna take 3 groups of 3. So then now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So we have 3, 3, right? So 3 groups of 3. That's 9/8. So you have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? And that's how 9/8 feels. And 12/8 is like, it can be like a very slow blues or like that old-timey, Elvis Presley ballad type deal when you have that. So now you have 4 groups of 3. So that's that 1, 2, 3, 1. So 1, 2, 4, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And that's how that's divided. So if you were to write music in 12/8, the way your notes kind of get blended together, it's like your flags join them in groups of 3, like this. Assuming that you're playing your notes like that. Now you may have noticed that these quarter notes have a dot next to them. So what are dotted notes? Dotted notes, when you dot a note, you add half the value of the note to it. So for instance, if I take a whole note and I add a note to it, I'm going to have 6 beats now. But if I have a half note and I add a dot to it, it's going to be worth 3 beats. A quarter note, 1.5 beats. 3/4 of a beat, and so on. And this is useful when you're trying to write either syncopated rhythms, which we'll talk about far into the future, or when I have situations like this, when I need to complete, right, my beats. So this equals 3/8 notes. So I could very well write 3 of these, and it will fit exactly like a 4. And that's compound meter. There's one last type of meter that I want to talk about before we stop this explanation on fundamentals of rhythm, and that is odd time. We talked about simple meters. That's when everything is divisible by 2. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Or compound meters where you have 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. But what happens when you put the 2 things together? Then you end up with odd meters. The simplest meter that you can have is 5 5, either 5/4 or 5/8. We're going to do 5/8 because I think it's easier to explain it with 5/8. So when you have 5/8, really what you have there is one group of 2 and one group of 3. So the way you count that 5/8 is 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3, or and it's odd because you're going to have one accent that's longer than the other one. It could be 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2, or 1 or the other way around. I did it 1 2 3, or 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3, right? So it'll be 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3. You see? So then everything gets divided that way, and then the same thing works with all the your primes. So if you do 7/8, you just add another 2. So 7/8 would be 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3, or any combination thereof. You could go 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2. And the bigger numbers, the scary meters that people think are so complicated, like 11/8 or something like that, they're nothing more than combinations of these things. So if you take 11/8, you can subdivide that into 5 and then 3 and 3, right? 5 plus 6 equals 11. So that now you have 1 2 and 3 groups of 3, right? So so that would be like 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 right? So that makes it not so difficult and foreign. Of course, being able to groove and play in these type of meters, it takes a little bit of practice. But, it's just like everything else. We start with simple things and slowly get into the more complex aspects of music. So this is going to be enough. This is all I got for you guys for today on rhythm. We'll go back to pitch and put all things together on our next video. Once again, if you have any questions about any of this, just let me know in the comments. And yeah, just don't forget to subscribe on the button down there. See you next time.